Kia ora, my name's Claire Ryan. I work for myself as well as working for a place called Manuanui in Charge. But I'm wanting to share with you my thoughts about relationships and sexuality in terms of how they impact on the disabled people I've met over the years. I've worked in the disability arena for probably close to 30 years. And my philosophy about sexuality and relationships is that it's something that obviously we're all born with, but there are some people that get to choose to express that more than others. And over the years I have worked with people that don't get to express that so much. And I think my biggest belief in the world about relationships and sexuality is love, and it's a word that most people are afraid of. It's something that a lot of support workers are told that they shouldn't have when they are working with disabled people, and a lot of disabled people don't feel like they're entitled to it. So that's where it is. So my, I guess my philosophy runs from talking about people's gender and their identity in the world, whether you're born male or female, or how you like to express your femininity, masculinity, who you're attracted to, or if you're not attracted to, or don't know yet, or and encouraging people to express those ideas, and trying to humanise what is called a human service, which quite often is not very humanising in its behaviour. In terms that we talk about, give people labels of service users or clients, and don't tend to talk about men or women or people. So that's me. I run workshops for support people, I run workshops for disabled people, I run workshops for anyone who will listen about sexuality and relationships, which funnily enough people want to discuss quite often. I help people access things around their sexuality, which again can go from just starting friendships or learning how to employ support people who are going to be inclusive of the important things in that person's life, again around gender or who their partner is or how they stand in the world or sit in the world, and right through to probably more of the controversial end of things where people might access the sex industry or find ways of expressing their sexuality, which again pushes the boundaries. So it's I'm very lucky to get to do what I do. Yeah, it's been a personal journey for me, and it's one that it's my passion. It puts fire in my belly to do this stuff. So yeah, so I'm not an expert. I just like it. I'm often referred to as a sex lady. So aren't I lucky? So working with a couple who both had autism, who wanted to date each other but didn't know how to get started, and a lot of people had just said, kind of given them hints, but of course that wasn't very helpful. So we wrote them a script, and they would practice talking to each other on the phone. So they would say one sentence and the other person would reply. So the guy says to the young woman, so would you like to have dinner with me on Friday night, have pizza? And she was supposed to say yes, because that's what the script said, and she went off script and said no. And he went, great, I'll pick you up at 7, because that was the next bit on the script. And of course they had a big fight and it didn't quite work out. But for some of the people I've met who have Asperger's or autism, this area is just, as you know, I mean it's confusing anyway, but I think sexuality education has to go more than just giving people concepts. You have to be brave to talk about some of the nitty-gritty parts of sexuality, and it's not fair just to give people bits of information that are not going to help them long term. So a lot of the work you do, especially with teenagers, talking to young guys about masturbation, but giving detail about even just basic things, the difference between semen and urine, because a lot of young guys who have just learned how to maybe use the toilet don't understand that now what's coming out of their penis is something completely different. And so even being able to use those words. And for me, I'm incredibly comfortable with it, and I can be running a workshop and I look up and everyone's kind of fainted because I forget that other people aren't that comfortable with it. So part of my workshops is helping people to get them to think what they think about stuff. So things like masturbation or relationships, or even just what they really do think about disabled people expressing sexuality, because it's not something that is visible in our society, and it's still seen as a privilege, in that the expectations and goals that are often set around disabled people's lives don't include things of intimacy and love, relationships, and they're hard, and I don't think any of us have succeeded. I don't know when you can actually say, right, well, I've arrived, you know, I've done it all perfectly. And the language that we use is really unusual. You talk about failed marriages or failed relationships. Well, we could talk about how we've successfully completed a marriage and we're moving on to the next one. Everyone needs change and diversity, but it's especially for people with significant impairment. The number of times I've said to their support workers or caregivers, saying, you know, tell me about the person's expressions of sexuality, or do they have a partner, or, and they'll say, oh, no, they're not interested in that. They've never ever mentioned it, so you know it's not important. And so I say to them, well, have they ever mentioned that they want to eat? Because a lot of people who have physical impairment, you know, maybe don't have language. Now, we wouldn't not give someone food. You know, wouldn't say, well, they never mentioned it, you know, now they're kind of dead. But when it comes to things like relationships or love, unless people mention it, we don't offer it. It's not part of service provision. So I think when it comes to, if you look, you know, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we look at basic needs, health and hygiene, food, water, shelter, all those things, everywhere, society's fine with disabled people having that stuff. You know, no, really, anyone who lives in a service doesn't live in poverty. But then when we start going up the levels to love and belonging, we tend to get a bit twitchy and think, oh, you know, are we going to open up a can of worms? And it seems like when you talk about the risks of disabled people being sexual or having relationships, apart from the usual things as what if they get pregnant or get infections, I think people actually genuinely do worry is what if they want to do it more than one time, or you know, what if they want to have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and those things suddenly become a problem. And for people with intellectual impairment, you know, you don't have to have a certain IQ to love someone, and yet we make it that you do. We put incredible hurdles in front of people. So a lot of that stuff is sort of try to break down with people. So the connection between individualised funding and relationships, of course, I mean, individualised funding is all about people being in charge and in control, and the world's the oyster of the person who has the funding now in terms of who they can have coming into their house. And I think that there's great opportunity for people to develop different relationships without the interference of some of the policies and I guess theories of how people should behave as support workers or as the disabled person. So recently I was at someone's house and their support worker was about to leave, and it was really nice to see the support person hug the disabled person when they left. In fact, it seemed really natural to do that, and I think about the number of times where I haven't seen that happen, or it's been seen as an inappropriate relationship, and that word is used far too much in the disability sector. Usually inappropriate means that we're trying to spoil a good time or change intimacy. So I think, you know, the possibility to have some meaningful, and meaningful sounds patronising, but some relationships of depth and robustness, IF or individualised funding offers that to people, and it offers them the opportunity to get out into their community a whole lot more. And you know, every support person will come with their whānau behind them, so the possibility of that disabled person meeting other people is great. But I think the other thing that happens is that people's self-esteem increases, and their concepts of beauty and attractiveness changes as well. And when you feel like you're in charge of something, and when people are choosing to be with you because, not just because they get paid, but because of how you are, that can make you stand differently in the world. And Yeah, so concepts of beauty and mana, I think I've seen change with people. One woman who I met who was incredibly nervous about doing individualised funding, and in fact, made declarations to me that she would never be able to do it, and it was impossible for her. She somehow just got on with it. She just found something different inside of herself, but did tell me about how she liked being a recluse and she liked her quiet lifestyle, and she was nervous about having people coming into her house, even though she'd had it for most of her life. But what she did was she kept some of her hours back each week for what she called playtime. And that was an opportunity for her to go and play. And it meant sometimes it meant someone driving her to a pub where she could drink heavily and they could drive her home. But it didn't mean that she had to go to bed at 4:30 every night and lie in her own thoughts until the next morning. She could now stay up late. And what's kind of carried on for her was for then some romance to happen in her life, which again caused chaos in her life, but it was beautiful chaos. It was the chaos that is intoxicating, and it's but it was almost it was too much, and then it came down again. But it's really exciting to see people having ebbs and flows in their lives, and I hope that people feel loved by what happens with individualised funding. I hope that people are a part of this because they love other human beings, and I despair at the number of people that just come to this work because they can't get a job somewhere else. This is special stuff, and I think when it comes to things like personal care, there's intimacy involved in there, and a lot of putting food into someone's mouth, dressing or undressing somebody, bathing their body, is incredibly intimate, and it can be something when you first meet someone in those first few months and you love doing all that stuff. You put food into each other's mouths and all that sort of stuff. After a while, you chuck food at the person's mouth. You don't want to do any of that stuff. But those beginning stages are very intimate. I'm not saying that that's how support people have their relationships with the people who employ them, but the degree of intimacy is there. And if you don't ever have any other touch in your life, then having a shower and someone touching your body could be the most important thing that happens to feed your soul that day. And so hopefully support workers understand the preciousness of that, and hopefully the disabled person can get that message across that their body is really important and it's a privilege to be doing that kind of work. So I'm interested in exploring that with people using individualised funding. I think there's a lot of work to be done about not just giving people, when you give people the funds to do stuff, their life will change. It's great being resourced and all those sorts of things, but hopefully some of those social things will change, or not. I mean, it's all about choice. But it would be a shame to see people becoming isolated because of individualised funding. So I think as a community now, there's an opportunity for people to connect quite differently and just experience all the things that make you feel good. Simple as that, really. I think responses to sexuality for disabled people is interesting, and one of the things, having worked for a large organisation that had a number of group homes and people living in groups, is that the concept of touch was rare for people. The only way that people got touched was to be told to go to the toilet or get in the van or whatever. And even the language around that, you talk about toileting people. You get this concept of going to a room, someone putting a toilet on you, or feeding people. I mean, you feed birds, or you might feed a baby, but you don't feed someone who might be or anyone really. You're putting food into someone's mouth. Head is tapu, and again, that there's a degree of intimacy around someone's mouth and food. For me anyway, because I love food, but food and love go together. And I find it hard if I see someone who might have food in a different way, so where they might have a peg tube where they where they have food going directly into their stomach. I remember going to a group home once where the person who had that was sitting in the lounge by themselves and everyone else was sitting around the table having dinner. And I think those sorts of things are the dehumanising things that can happen for disabled people who are in care. So the flip side of that is that individualised funding might allow people to experience food and love, or the at least taste food, or be around having someone come in and cook a meal and having the smell of food in your house. Talking about food a lot, but it's important. But also our responses to arousal. And I think sometimes in the disability sector we can be like the pleasure police, and that when people show arousal, it may be too that it happens when someone's being supported to have a shower. If you haven't been touched all day and then someone comes and takes your clothes off and starts washing your body, you'd hope that there'd be some kind of pleasure in that it's not just a functionary cleaning thing. But our response to that doesn't need to be quite as offensive as what it has been. I've seen people, and probably in the early years for myself, support people not knowing how to respond to that. And I don't think it's because of bad support people. I just think that agencies or employers haven't thought about how to guide people. But the great thing now is that with individualised funding, the disabled person's the employer, and ultimately they're the trainer. They're the person that will educate someone. So it would be nice if someone could say, look, quite often when I'm having a bath, I really like to stay in there and have a bit of a soak and listen to some music and have a glass of wine, and I find it very pleasurable, and it's important for me to have pleasure. It's not a sexual thing towards you, but can you give me some time? Or, I don't know, I try to control my erections, but I can't. And it's got nothing to do with you, it's just, or maybe it has. And hopefully that people won't respond to that in a negative way, because you just need someone to make one negative comment about yourself. When you're in an incredibly vulnerable state, you imagine sort of being naked on a changing table and someone makes fun of your body and you've got no way of covering yourself up. Those sorts of things. So hopefully, the new trained workforce that will come from individualised funding will come from disabled people being the educators, and no longer people like me bleating on about it. I think when it comes to disabled people employing the significant people in their lives to be around them, so employees or workers, don't second guess yourself. You know who's good, and listen to your body. Our bodies talk to us all the time. Deepak Chopra, who's beautiful philosopher, it talks about how there is the fluid that is in your brain and in your stomach that's connected to having responses to things does exist in your heart and your stomach. So when you're saying you're having a gut feeling or your heart is breaking, those things are happening. So your body talks to you when it's hungry, it'll rumble, you'll sweat when you're hot, all those sorts of things. So if you respond to someone, then go with that gut feeling. People can grow into a job, but you don't have to take just who's available. The more you express your mana when you meet someone, the more they're going to know that they're working with someone who's important. And I think that relationships are going to be the most essential part of individualised funding. You can already see that people have a willingness to work outside of their working hours, their paid hours, because those relationships form, and they should. That's what's supposed to happen. If you see someone every day, you're going to form a connection. So let's just chill out a bit, and hopefully people can just be nice to each other. It's not a difficult concept. We talk about support people having boundaries and standards. Well, of course, but you can do that with love, and if the platform is coming from a place of love, because if it's not coming from a platform of love, the opposite is that is fear, and you can see that when you fear disability, or if you fear the person who's employing you, that will come through in how you work. So I think there's a new generation of kids coming through who are going to connect with each other. They're going to go and live with one another, and they'll have individualised funding as the money side of things, but they're going to create a whole new blueprint that we don't even know what the possibilities are. So yay.